I'm Laura, and recently I got the opportunity to go to Texas and visit the set of the hit series The Chosen. Ahead of season 3, I spoke with some of the cast and crew of the series to get their thoughts on the new season and what it's like playing such iconic figures. I hope you enjoy. Well, Yoshi, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Your character, Phillip, how would you describe him?
Okay, so Philip is, he's the most tenured of Jesus's disciples as far as preparing for this lifestyle. So for all intents and purposes, as far as our story is concerned, Philip was training under John the Baptist, who was Jesus' mentor. He's his cousin, but he baptized Jesus, he trained Jesus to a degree at least. So Philip, unlike the other disciples, has been training for this his whole life. He's been waking up and jumping in the lake and taking cold plunges, taking vows of silence, living with very, fasting. Living a life of sacrifice and preparing for the Messiah to come. Mm-hmm. Whereas the other disciples are maybe just now getting accustomed to that lifestyle and having to sacrifice their luxuries for the first time and go away from their families and live in tents on dirt. And so Philip is able to maybe take a bit of a leadership role within the group because he's more familiar with what they're doing, and he's sort of excited about it, where some of the other disciples might be a bit trepidatious. And so, for example, when Philip comes along in season 2, he takes a liking to Matthew, who at that time was maybe not really accepted by his fellow followers of Jesus because of who he was before, which was a tax collector. So some of the disciples had a problem with that because they felt like, how can we forgive this man who worked with the Romans and sort of like worked for his personal gain against us? Which, they maybe have the right to feel that way, but part of the journey of following Jesus is sacrificing your ideals and sacrificing judgment on people's past and accepting them for who they are right now, which gives them an opportunity to sort of reinvent themselves. And so Philip comes along and looks at Matthew in the eyes and says, I see a good man in front of me, and that's who I'm going to speak to, not to who he was yesterday. And so maybe he leads by example a little bit for the other disciples. And what's interesting is in season 3, what The Chosen's so good at doing is taking an established narrative and flipping on its head. So this season, in season 3, we get to explore with Philip some other colors, which are, you've been training for this moment your whole life. The moment has come. Jesus put you on a specific mission, and maybe you weren't as successful as you wanted to be. And so what does that mean about Philip? What does that mean as far as self-doubt creeping in, and are you who you thought you were? So a very interesting journey so far with Philip.
Yeah, and it's a big question to be asking. What do you do when you get the moment and maybe you just don't realize it in the way that you thought you might? But picking up on something you said there about in following Jesus, we're really submitting our ideals to something bigger. Yeah. That's a huge idea, I think, particularly for this day and age, to think that we have to let go of the way we might see things to elevate them, I suppose, to the way Jesus saw things and encourages us to see things. What's your view on that, the way that we have to give our perspectives over in some respect to these bigger ideals that the Bible represents?
Yeah, I think it's a healthy way to go about things, to not, to really spend time listening and forming a relationship with whatever that thing is that you're listening for, and to sort of make up your own mind on things, rather than be so adamant about preaching an idea that you've learned through other humans. So forming that relationship with what they would call, as far as the Bible's concerned, the Spirit, and sort of maybe being within a practice every day of trying to listen. For the East it would be meditation, for the West it would be maybe prayer. Maybe those are sort of aiming at the same thing at the end of the day.
The way that Jesus has been represented on screen, the way that The Chosen has tackled faith-based subjects is obviously so different to other projects we've seen of this nature previously. As an actor, what was your interest in being part of a faith-forward story, as you put it, and particularly The Chosen?
I think that, with anyone, there comes a moment in life that's the moment where you're supposed to reinvent yourself or be reborn or die and rise like a phoenix out of the ashes kind of thing. And people do that in different ways. And for me, when that moment arose, I stumbled upon some lectures that explored the psychological significance of the Old Testament. So
Wow.
for the first time, I was able to connect to the material through my intellect, which for me, I've always been interested in psychology, so that was sort of my gateway in. I was like, oh, these are actually really cool stories that are deeply coded, and it's really juicy to dive in and try to understand them, because it's not as easy as you can just read it and understand it. Like, it takes like work, and that work creates this sort of alchemical response in you to like when you finally connect to like what you think it might mean, it kind of gives you goosebumps. So that was happening to me, and then I had an experience that brought me to a church, which I never would have thought I've been interested in doing, but this church was very welcoming to all types of people and faith systems, and they weren't interested in converting you, but rather just teaching you the parables of the New Testament, very plain and simply, like trying to understand them together. So I did that for a while too, and suddenly I'm learning about the old and the new, and then I'm reading the text for myself for the first time, and just trying to put that work in, and then the audition comes. And so and I was working as a carpenter at the time too, so there was all these kind of weird synchronicities that made me feel engaged and motivated to be a part of this project. And I'm so happy that I am, because it's an absolute blessing, regardless of the cast's faith systems. It's not really what's important. What's important is that we're a part of something that is attempting to promote a very good story. We could be a part of something that promotes violence or car chases or meaningless stuff, but it could be much worse than being a part of something like this.
Totally, and it is allowing people to see meaning in things and ask really great questions. So thank you so much for your role in it, and for chatting with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Next time, producer Catherine Warnock talks about how Jesus embraces our mess.
Jesus really did come for humans, us as messy humans. Like, he meets us in the midst of the mess in the process, and just because we decide to follow him doesn't mean that he stops loving us in the midst of the mess in the process.